Hello everyone, and welcome to the last lecture in this week's series, in which we'll be covering the 7 deadly logical sins. Well, the one thing that we want to ask ourselves whenever we're confronted with an argument or a claim, for example, we should do this because of this, we should ask ourselves, does the fallacy exist? Some questions that we might want to ask in order to prove this is, does the proof hold up? Am I given the right number of choices? Does the proof lead to the conclusion? And ultimately, who cares? Now, the first of the deadly sins, logical ones that is the false comparison. And there are a number of different fallacies that fall under this umbrella. First, there is the all-natural fallacy, which of course indicates that because something is found in nature, it therefore must be good for you, which we of course know isn't true because, for example, arsenic is found in nature. It's not good for us. There is of course an appeal to popularity. Everyone is doing it, so should you. There is the reduction ad absurdum, which basically means reducing an argument to an absurd conclusion. So, because this happens, then something utterly ridiculous will ensue. There is, of course, the false comparison or false analogy, otherwise known as the apples to oranges. They are not alike, but one argues that something is. And then there is the unit fallacy, which, again, has to do with voodoo math. Say, for example, as Heinrich says, that a news team reports that crime was at 5%, fell 5% last year, and fell another 8% this year. Now, one might be tempted to say that overall, in the last 2 years, it's fallen 13%. But in actuality, the 8% is of 5%, making it much less than 13% overall. The second deadly sin is the bad example. And here we have both the misinterpreting of evidence and the hasty generalization. And the bad example just basically squashes many complex issues into something that is simple, without really understanding all that is involved. And of course, we have the ignorance is proof sin. And this basically falls under the fallacy of ignorance, that the lack of evidence becomes the evidence itself. So for you hunters, for example, just because you're in the woods hunting for deer, does not, and you cannot find any, does not mean that they don't exist. There are any number of factors that we aren't taking into account. The time of day, the time of season, and of course the overarching fear that many deer have of human beings with guns or crossbows. Then we have the tautology, which is just basically a repetition of words, where the proof and the conclusion are the same thing. This is a logical redundancy that ultimately proves nothing. For example, we are here because we are here because we are here doesn't really answer the why. Next we have the false choice, which can come in a few different forms. We first have the many questions that also, again, make two things that are very separate seem the same, such as, when did you stop beating your wife? Only leads you to one inevitable answer, when of course there are different questions being addressed here. And we have the false dilemma, which again makes it seem as if you only have one choice, when in many instances you have more than one choice. The red herring, which is one of my favorites, is used as a distraction tool. We have the example from South Park, right, where Cartman is questioning an O.J. Simpson-like character about the death of his wife, and he leads him through this series of questionings, about the murder and whatnot, and then comes to this conclusion that if, Chewbacca can escape Endor, then therefore the man must be guilty. Again, distracting from the actual issue, which would be the potential murder, by throwing in a reference to Star Wars. And the straw man fallacy also falls under this red herring category because it diverts our attention from a more complex argument and simplifies it. So instead of asking, who drank all the orange juice, instead of answering that question, it's much easier to switch the topic to something easier, again, in blame, such as, oh, well, why weren't the dishes done? And our final logical sin is the wrong ending. And this, of course, comes in the form of both the slippery slope and what is known as post hoc ergo propter hoc. The slippery slope indicates that if we make one choice, that potential dire consequences will follow. So, for example, the girl who decides to get her nose pierced or get a tattoo will then inevitably drop out of high school and go off and become a groupie for the latest heavy metal band. Well, we know that one thing doesn't necessarily follow the other, such as in the post hoc ergo propter hoc, or therefore because of it. And of course you can throw around that Latin phrase at cocktail parties and look pretty awesome and intelligent. Heinrich also calls this the Chanticleer fallacy, named after the rooster who thought because he crowed, the sun came up. Again, just because one thing follows another does not mean that that first thing caused it to happen. Thus ends our lectures for this week. Your password for the quiz is Logos with a capital L. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to email me or post to discussion board. Have a great week.